Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Friday Fundamental of 2019. This summer series, we hope to take you through little vignettes, if you will, that are going to focus on specific areas of design using SoftPlan. Today's class is actually going to be approximately 45 minutes in length, and will take us through the design of this little kitchen area right here. Now, um, this design that I'm going to be taking through, I'm very familiar with because it's actually one that I'm working on for an actual real-world project here in Nashville, Tennessee. And so my goal is to take you through not only how to lay out things like kitchen cabinets or appliances and so on, but how I've utilized building options to pull together the presentation of the design itself. And so what you're seeing right now is kind of the finished proposal of what the kitchen could look like going forward. I have utilized, as you're going to see at this stage, various building options. So, and we'll be discussing some of these that we're going to use as it pertains to the kitchen. The original house was drawn using the default building options. It's a small two-bedroom house, which you'll get a moment to look at on the screen in floor plan mode. Then there was going to be a phase one, which would be an addition that was going off the back. There will be a demolition building option that's going to be utilized. And then phase two, which is really going to be the area that we're going to focus on, which is the kitchen design. These building options, as you're going to see, basically allow you to not only control the visibility of something from a plan perspective, but also from a modeling perspective, which is to say it will impact your three-dimensional model. It will also impact your bill of materials, your elevations, and your cross-sections. So in today's class, I'm going to use building option 4 to replicate the design that I did in phase 2 building option, okay, so that you can see not only how to draw the kitchen, but how you can control the visibility of those options within the plan. Now, the class is going to move along at a pretty good pace in order to get this done within 45 to 50 minutes. I'm not going to have the opportunity to be able to answer questions audibly throughout the class. So what I would ask you to do is if you happen to have a question, you can type it in the chat. If we have time at the end, I will try and cycle back through and answer some of those questions. I will also point out that I am recording the class, and so once we finish today, I'll be able to upload this class likely early next week for you so that you can go back and review this. I'll post a link on our SoftPlan Facebook page, our SoftPlan user group page, and it will be available from our web page under the Friday Fundamentals. So let's get ourselves started. I'm going to put away this this building option for right now. I'm going to return to the floor plan, which, as you can see, just using building options and color coding, in essence, we have the existing house that's going to be here. The blue represents actually the phase 1, which is the larger addition that's going on the back. And then, as I said, phase 2, which is actually outlined in the green, is going to be the area we're actually focusing on. So using building options, I'll be able to come in and actually remove the check boxes from each of the phase 1 and phase 2 options, and I'm going to turn the demolition on for just a moment so you can get familiar with the plan real brief, okay? So what we have is, this is the existing house in kind of an East Nashville area that I'm working with. It has, you know, 2 small bedrooms off to the right-hand side, okay, an existing bath. None of that we're actually touching. And then color-coded as per the demolition is the gray area of the walls. We have the kitchen itself, I'm not even done it justice how cut up and so on it is. I simply drew some cabinets in to give it a feel for a kitchen. An existing dining area that actually has a laundry area off of it, and then a very small, or smaller than it really is, living area because of the walls that are in there.
No, I don't
And
know
so the
how to
goal
do
here would
that.
be to go in, and we're going to remove this. Now, a moment ago, I was inside the 3D and you saw a full kitchen. Just by going in through the building options and turning off, in my case, phase 2, and enabling the demolition walls, at this stage, you can see that I'm actually going to be removing much of the work that I had drawn on the plan. And this is basically, in essence, what the existing house, kind of looks like at this stage. And so we're going to go in on this plan, and we're going to, through the main floor plan, these walls here, as I edit them, anything that's in gray, and when they were drawn, okay, underneath the common tab, I'll have the option of assigning the building option with which they're being drawn. I can also set that as a default building option that we're going to draw up there. And so that's where I'm going to be drawing everything within building option 4 as we move forward. So to set these up within the plan, I'm simply going to go to model at this stage, and as I go into model, you'll see I have building options from my ribbon bar. As I click on the building options here, these ones are already set up, and in this case here I have building option 4, which I can then rename anything that I want. So in my case, I'm just going to call it my Friday class option. Okay, and so once I have done this, I'm going to move and make that option visible. Therefore, as I begin to draw in this building option, it's going to, begin to show up on the plan. Moving left to right on this listing that's here. The fade option is literally what, it's going to kind of fade the colors to background, so to speak. And what I'm more interested in is on the use item colors. A moment ago, I had various building options on, and you saw part of the plan was blue, and part of it was green, and some of it was brown, and then I've got gray walls on there. And each of those colors for me meant something as far as the option is concerned. So I'm going to remove the use item colors, which would then allow me to come in at this stage and select what color coding I want to use for building option 4, which is now called Friday class. Okay, so in this case here, I'm just going to select, let's say, this kind of teal blue there is going to be the building option that I'm going to be drawing in. By color coding your options, you will instantly get a visual feedback as to what building option it's been drawn in. Okay, and therefore if that option is turned on or off, you know what's going to go away and what's not. Further to that, and very important in my case with this, when I ran a printout for the homeowner, they could very visibly see what we were proposing, what we're taking out, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do is Friday class or building option 4 has now been set up to be visible. Okay, I'm going to use this as my color, and I will simply select OK to that option. And now up here in the upper right hand corner, I can click on from the status bar from default building option to be drawing inside the Friday class building option. And so when I click OK, nothing changes about the drawing, but you can see in the status bar that's listed there. So if I were to come in through, I'm just going to do a draw wall real quick, and I'll just pick the 2x4 brick, and I'm just going to click to draw this. You can now see the color coding difference on these two walls. This one being the reddish brown default color that's in there, which is, I know is the default building option. That's what I drew. Okay, and then this one, because it was set to Friday class under the same comment tab, it will list that. And I show you the editing, purpose here because it's possible as you're flipping between building options, you may want to, actually, you may draw something in the wrong building option. You can simply edit it at that stage and assign it to one or more building options depending on what you want it to have. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to simply erase this so we can begin, the kind of the design process that's going to happen in here. With these walls all modified as demolition, I actually do not want them, being displayed any longer. And I'm going to turn the phase 1 building option back on because as you can see, we basically are removing some of these walls. There's going to be beams and such that have to be structurally engineered and put in there, but that allows that really open up all of this space. And because we're adding an entryway, a new entryway here that was not available from the back, we wanted to move the kitchen over here. And by moving the kitchen, and because we're on a crawl space, it'll make it a little bit easier as far as that goes. Okay, we can kind of open up this entire space within the plan. And so now, just to give you a brief, this is kind of what we're working with. All right, so there's the addition off the back, and what you and I are going to be focusing on is what we're doing inside the house here. Okay, so this is the large open area that we're going to work with now. And so I'm going to change this from textured right now into shaded, just because it'll generate a little bit faster for me, okay, as far as the drawing is concerned. And then we can always go back to the texture a little bit later. So inside the main floor plan, I'm going to zoom up, to this area right here is where we're going to begin the actual design from. Okay, and as I come in through draw and symbol at this stage, all right, I'm using SoftPlan Plus. I've got all of the up-to-date libraries within the plan itself, and so as I click on this, I'll be able to go down into the list of manufacturers. Okay, and I could drill down into SoftPlan Plus, or in my case, just under the manufacturers and the appliances, you can see I can select from a host of, in this case, General Electric appliances. And so inside the monogram selection, if you will, I could scroll down and find, the refrigerator to get ourselves started. And so once I do this, I'm just going to click OK. I'm drawing in the Friday class, remember, and so as I click that, it's going to drop that symbol in there, and it's color-coded to match the building option for me. Okay, and so with that drawn in at this stage, again, I could pop back and forth, and I won't do this a whole lot, but you'll be able to see that I'll be able to go in and modify or change these things as we go. Now, once that has been drawn, I'm going to actually come in and I'll move this out of the way for just a second, because what I'd like to do is actually build in kind of a overhead cabinets and fillers on the sides and so on. So that's going to take me into the kitchen cabinet setting. And so in this case here, inside the Friday class, I'm going to come in through the cabinet, and in this case, I'll select the tall option, which takes me into the configure cabinet option. From here, I'll be able to then modify, what my, dimensions are going to be as far as my cabinet is concerned. I can select what the type is, so I selected tall to begin with, rectangular, or in this case, I'm going to go to a fill option, and then here I could simply type in what that dimension is going to be. Okay, I can come down to the depth and make it the depth of the refrigerator. Okay, and then in this case here, I'll just simply type in 72 inches for the height at this point. Once I have done that, I'm going to position my cursor with where I wish to draw it. I will click to insert it, and then what you will see, and then click for the direction it will be drawn in. SoftPlan is going to snap the cabinet a ½ inch off of the stud wall with which you see. Okay, this being phase 1, which is an additional wall, and then this being the existing wall that it's there, and it's going to drop the cabinet in there for me. In this case now, I could actually move this refrigerator up to that cabinet, okay, and drop it in. And then using the move and copy option, I could select that same fill cabinet that's there, okay, and copy another option or iteration of it, on the other side of the refrigerator. And so as we look at this, we can see we've got the cabinets, sitting here and here on the actual drawing. Now, I can go ahead now and begin to add in, a wall cabinet that's going to be placed over top of that in time and build that out. And so inside the main floor plan, okay, and just using, in my case, I know this refrigerator, if I were to edit this, okay, as I modify this, the actual width is going to be 3 feet, and I've added 2 inches on either side, right, as far as that dimension's concerned. Okay, so I can either have the fillers run all the way up or place the wall cabinet on top of this. And so with the refrigerator being 3 feet, I'm going to add a 36-inch in, and then I'll actually modify these fillers and make them a little bit taller than what they are. So using the draw and cabinet option, in this case here, I can come into wall. And as I select this, okay, I can then select what the width is going to be. All right, so we've got the face here. I can change the depth once again, this time to be 24 inches. And the 24 inches for me, okay, is going to make it the depth of the actual refrigerator itself. As far as the offset's concerned, I know that this refrigerator, I want to, pop this thing up, okay, and so that's going to make me, want to modify this height here. okay, as far as the cabinet is concerned. And so we get, basically, we're working towards an 8-foot plate height, which is what the wall heights are in here. Turning my snap on, which is my F11 function key on the keyboard, I can then snap this over top of the refrigerator, okay? And if I move this out of the way for just a second, you can see I'm just going to place that in. So I'm going to move this back into place. And as I take a look at this, all right, there's where my cabinet is based on, as I edit this for the dimensions, okay, as I'm looking at this, what my heights are going to be. So I could actually make that a different height altogether, okay, changing that to 24 inches, okay, or 21 inches if we want to create a gap between the top of the refrigerator and the underside of the cabinet to allow for ventilation and so on, okay. I could also change this because it's going all the way to the ceiling right now, as you can see me moving up and down on that, and so I could change that offset from something other than what I've got there, so that we create room to actually put crown molding above this. All right, so those are all things that I can do within the plan. Now you can also, just simply, modifying or editing, these cabinets. You can change their heights, etc. So in this case here, I know I've got a top height of 93 inches. I could edit this individual filler cabinet, okay, and underneath the actual height itself, do the same thing to pop that up. And then I'm going to repeat edit this change over here, so I get the two, filler cabinets on either side running to the same height. Okay, so that's going to place that in there for me, all right, as far as that goes. And now we can go ahead and begin to place some of the other base cabinets and so on that are going to run across here. And so what I will do is I will come back to the main floor plan. I'm going to just save what I've done at this stage, and then using the draw cabinet and selecting the base option, I can, open this up. Now, I've got my base and I've got my shape, but you can also change things like what the faceplate is going to look like. Okay, so you can see we've got all kinds of different face options that are going to be in there. So if I simply wanted a 3-drawer count beside the refrigerator right there, I could change that option. I can go back in this case to do 1-door or 2-door options and have that added in. So once I select the option that I want to use, I can then change what the default width is going to be. And of course, I'm working from a strength of the fact that I've gone out, I know the design at this stage, so I'm basically able to from the existing plan that I've already laid out, know that I wanted to place a 21-inch cabinet in there. Obviously, in your case, you're working from a slight disadvantage of not knowing that, and so I'm just going to take you through as quickly as I can on what cabinets I can draw. I'm going to leave this dialog open at this stage, and that's going to allow me to just pick cabinets as we go. So in this case, I select the 18-inch. I'm going to come back and pick the 3-drawer option that's there, and we're going to click to place that in, on the actual plan itself. Okay, and so now as I continuing to move along, I'm going to select this 36-inch cabinet. And the reason I'm putting a 36-inch cabinet in right now is more as a placeholder. This is where I'm going to place a range, and so as I'm laying my cabinets out, I placed a 36-inch cabinet in there, which will be substituted out a little bit later on the drawing. Now, if I go to miscellaneous and what's called explode, and the keyboard shortcut for this is simply hitting Control E with your cursor hovering over top of the cabinets which have been joined together. But as I click on this, I select explode and pick these, it will break them down into the individual cabinets. And that would allow me to now, using the draw select option, to pick the same 3-drawer cabinet and place it on the other side of the range. And then hitting the letter S, which is the same as draw select, add the same 21-inch cabinet on the other side of that. Okay, and so if I wanted to keep this as complete symmetry, I could. I can also edit cabinets on the fly. So if you come in after the fact and you're like, I'd like to, increase this to, let's say, 30 inches. Okay, so that's all I did was just simply key it in. You'll have the option of going into the face and changing it if you wanted to have a 2-door with drawer panel on there. And when I click OK and run a cleanup, SoftPlan will adjust the cabinets and move this along so that they run completely, in line with one another. Okay, and so what we have at this point right now is we're looking at this is we basically laid these cabinets out at this stage. And so there's our drawers on either side. side. Now this one's going to have a single door and drawer, and then because this is a slightly larger, I put 2 drawers down there as far as that goes. And that's going to leave us, area or room for a single cabinet, right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into the main floor plan for just a second. And I'm going to select my dimension option, and I'm going to turn my symbol dimension on. And I'm just going to run a dimension from the wall to that cabinet so that I have something to work from. And so we can see at this stage right now that dimension right there at 3 foot 2.5, if I subtract a 1/2 inch off for the drywall, right, is we've got room for a 38-inch kind of custom pantry cabinet is what we're going to put in there. And so I'm going to build one of those at this stage, as quickly as I can, and keep in mind, I already, I have one built, but I'm going to take you through how to do this, as quickly as I can. So I'm going to come in through draw, and I'll pick the select, and I'm going to click this option to draw that cabinet in, and I'll select the edit feature on it. Now I do know that the dimension on this is going to be 38 inches, and the reason I know that is just based on the dimension. And so in this case here, moving it into place and then running a cleanup, it fills that option in, and we can see there it is. I do want to come in at this stage now and just simply edit this cabinet. Now, when I do that, it pulls up the dimensions that I've input in there, and I'm going to go to the face option. And right now, as you can see, it is a, 2-door recessed, etc. Okay, and I'm going to go in and add a custom face to this cabinet. So we have the 3 drawers that are going to be there, and then I'm going to add a part on top of that, and just simply add, the type of cabinet that I want to put on top of this option right here. Okay, and so if I were to do that, I could go ahead and I could then add, cabinet, pieces on there. Now, because I added a double door, okay, I'm going to change this to a tall so that we actually get these, cabinets or these handles more in the middle of this option. You'll see at this stage right now that I've got my 4 pieces of the cabinet. There's 3 drawers and a double door here, and only the middle drawer is actually fixed. And so I'm going to go through and option these, options right here to fix them. And what that will do is these are all going to this dimension right here, and then the tall cabinet itself will be stretched to fit to the height. I'll turn off the countertop in just a minute on that, so I'm not really concerned about that. But this will allow me to now come in, and I could add a 12-inch base here. Okay, and then I could add a 8-inch base there, and then I've got my 6-inch base or something like that left over. And so as I come into the actual cabinet itself, and I change the overall height to 93 inches, and I'm going to go to countertop and just turn that off, as I look at this inside the 3D shaded, you can see based on the dimensions I put in there, that's what we have. And so I can go back into this face option, edit the custom face, okay, and change these options to what they need to be, okay, to create that kind of a scenario right there. Okay, so that's just editing the faces on there. I'm not concerned right now that the the colors and all that don't match. Right now I'm actually trying to lay out what I want my overall option to be, and so it's just a matter of creating that custom face and then setting it to what you want your dimension to read. Okay, and then once I've set that up, these two are obviously equal, and then I've got a very small one in there. To go along with that, editing faces, you can see right now this has actually got a recessed drawer front. These ones I drew without, so if I wanted to modify that quickly, I could come in here and change the flat front to be recessed and click OK, and then I'll just do a right-click repeat edit to apply that over there. And so that's how quickly we can get that modified, on the fly. Other things that you can modify or change on this, and let me just go in, I'm just going to go into mode options for just a second and turn the lighting up on this so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so it's not so dark on your end when you're looking at it. But now as you take a look at this, we'll be able to go in and modify not just the finishes, but also things like, hardware, etc. So for example, I'm going to edit this cabinet right here. Now we've talked a bit about the face and so on at this stage, okay, and changing that. I'm going to go into the accessories, and right now you see that right now the cabinet hardware we're using is just a simple knob hardware there. So if I change this to the pull pipe, and then I change it to be different for the drawers, and in this case here, I'm just going to go into the scallop or pull cup. You can see I now get a pull cup on there and that option there. And so now I could just simply repeat edit these changes across the front. That cabinet's not going to stay anyway, and do something like so that all of these cabinets, if their doors get pull pipes, and if they're not, they get the option of the scallop itself. Using the surface copy paste, I could pick and add the blue option there, so that they're all the same option as far as that setting is concerned. Okay, so that gets our kind of some of these cabinets in. Let's edit this cabinet that we've got here. And I told you I dropped a 36-inch cabinet by default in there as a placeholder. So in this case, as I modify this cabinet, okay, I'll be able to come in to the base cabinet. And down here, we've added some options which allow you to add things like sinks, taps. If this was a bathroom, a mirror over top of the cabinet. And of course, a replace cabinet, which has been around for a while, but maybe an option you didn't know was there. And as I open this up, I'll be able to go down into the manufacturer, and I'm going to stick with just my General Electric for right now. And I'll scroll this down and find, let's say, this 36-inch, dual, range right here. When I click OK, that will be placed in place of the cabinet itself. And so as we take a look at this, it's also added using the Friday, building option, there. So keep in mind, if I wanted to have a building option 5, which had different options on here, I could go ahead and draw a separate option and just turn this one off. And that's kind of the beauty, is your bill of materials is being added as we go to this, on the fly. Okay. So with this done, I'll come back into this option right here, and we're just going to add a couple of upper cabinets. We know that this is a 30-inch cabinet, and then we've got a drawer cabinet right here. And so I'm going to zoom this up. I'm going to select my cabinet option, and I'll go to my wall cabinet. Okay, and so here I could select what my height is going to be and what my widths are going to be. So I'll pick my 30-inch. I'm going to click on the height and just type in that I want a 36-inch height right there, and then I could position my cursor where I want that to be drawn and click. Okay, I could return to this, and if I wanted to pick a 12-inch, I could just point and click to add that in there. And so again, over on this side, okay, so maybe not quite the same symmetry. I may just pick the 30-inch and add it only. To this side right here, and it's snapped to, in this case, to my wall cabinet. So I'm just going to manually move this cabinet to the other side of the filler. And if you do have to move any cabinets, because what's happening here is just the cleanup feature of it finding a wall, what you can always do is simply edit a cabinet itself, go into the common tab, and remove it from cleanup so that it holds its position. Okay, so in this case here, I'm going to edit these cabinets, and just based on the elevation, I'm going to change its top height, so I'm moving it up as far as that's concerned, and then I'll repeat edit these changes, to these cabinets as well. These cabinets can be modified, and I could change things like maybe I want glass cabinetry for my upper cabinets. And so when I edit this, this is where my face option once again comes into play. And so you'll see that right now I've got a wall 2-door. I could just simply come in and I could change this to a 2-door glass grill. And when I do that, it's going to place that in there, and I'll repeat edit that change over here. And then in this case right here, I'll just simply edit this and change it to a single door, glass grill as far as the options concerned. Again, finishes and so on, we will get to as far as those go. Okay, I can under this same thing, under the accessories, is where you're going to be able to modify things like crown molding. And so when I click the option to add crown molding, you'll have a host of profiles that you can select from. So in my case, I'll just select the default right now, and then I'll just repeat edit these changes to these other cabinets that we have. And as I do so, okay, it's going to finish this out for me so that we've now got a crown mold running all the way around, okay, as far as the cabinets are concerned. And so that's going to place that in there. Now I'm going to back this out just a little bit because I want to go in and add an island and add a few other features in there, and then we'll talk about some of the room finishes that we're going to, place on this actual drawing itself. So as I come back into the main floor plan, and I'm just going to save what I've got right here, I'm going to select a base cabinet from my listing or my option right here, and I'll pick my let's just start with a 30-inch. And once again, I could select the type of door that I want. So let's just pick something like this, and I'll drag this over here and then just simply click where I want this to start and drop it in. And then returning to this, I'll pick, or I'm going to key in a custom 39-inch version of this. And again, I'm just click to start for the rear, drag it or draw towards the front over the cabinet and place it in. The 24-inch, I'm dropping in for a dishwasher. So that's going to be a similar, feature right there. And so then just using the same draw select option, I'm going to add these cabinets across the back, just creating a kind of a large island, setting, if you will. Okay. So as we're looking at this, if I wanted to place any kind of a, bookshelves or fillers or anything along that lines, okay, you can come in and you can actually select from the face. Okay, we've got all kinds of open cabinets in there and so on, again, that you could customize and set up. Okay, you'll see that we've got specialty cabinets that are available under the different libraries, and you'll also find that under the cabinet option we've also got a host of manufacturers. And so while I'm not drawing with these today, know that these are all in there. So if you had a double oven that you were looking to put in there, those are cabinets that are available to you as well, and you would certainly be able to add them in. Okay, returning to what I've got right here, I'm going to edit this. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dimension this first and foremost. And so using the dimension option and making sure my symbol dimensions are turned on, I can actually set up that dimension for what that depth is going to be, and then move it so that we've got a proper aisle right there. I would also be able to pull extension lines off, and again using the dimension feature to be able to do the same thing here so that I can edit this and make sure I've got the correct of what I want to do, and it moves the cabinets as a whole. Okay. So now, exploding this, I'm going to edit this cabinet right here, and this is where you can come in and place the sink. And so as I do this, it takes me into the default kitchen library, if you will, and I'll be able to go into the manufacturer option, okay, and as I do, I can then go down into the Kohler option and sinks. And you'll see that we've got a host of, sinks, and I typically tend to use manufacturer symbols as much as possible, and just because they give a very realistic feel. Plus, if the client likes it, you're already working with a manufacturer that you might want to use, and so then you could just order that specifically. So we've got a large kind of double apron type sink that right here, and so if I click OK on this, it's going to drop that in, and as I take a look at inside the 3D, it's going to automatically cut that hole for me there. Okay, and if I if necessary, it's going to center this, so I can move this all the way to the front so that it overhangs the front, thereby creating the apron type setting that we're using. And so I'll just zoom this up, and something like so, and then we'll just move this to get it where we want it to be. Okay, and so I'm going to undo and just have this set back at where it was. And so it's just, again, depending on what your settings are. Again, I can also come in and edit this setting right here, and I'm going to, on the base cabinet, add a faucet. And so if you don't know what you want to use, you can always do a quick search just under the listing of options that are down there in the lower left, and then you can scroll down to find the faucet that you want to use. So whether it's a specific manufacturer or just one of the generic ones that's in there. Okay, so we've got all kinds of them in, and so in this case here, you can select from the listings that are there. Okay, in my case, I'll just pick something that's simple and for what we're doing, and drop it into place. They'll be centered and so on as far as your your cabinet is concerned. So that drops that in. Now in this case here with the dishwasher that's placed here, I'm going to replace that cabinet, and this is where I can come in and just under the the General Electric, which is where I've been drawing a lot of my cabinets and items from. I can scroll down and find myself a dishwasher symbol that I want to use, and then have that placed in there on the option. The cabinet itself will actually be if you will, the door taken off and hollowed out, and the dishwasher would be added in place on that symbol. Okay, and so that's going to get that there. Now, with these cabinets, I'm actually going to shore them up a little bit, and so what I'm going to do is I'll explode this once again. I'm going to edit this cabinet, and this time I'm just going to change the depth. Okay, I'm trying to just show you that you've got full flexibility, so I'm going to give it a 12-inch depth, but then on the countertop, I'm actually going to modify the overhang on that to, let's say, 8 inches, so it pushes that out. And so when I do that and I just simply repeat edit this change, it creates the breakfast bar that we want to have on there. So there's a bit of an overhang, and that overhang can be anything that you want, but that gets us that dropped in. I want to be cognizant of the time, and we're not going to be able to get everything sketched in and so on, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the finishes and so on that we might want to also put in here as far as the plan is concerned. So as I'm looking at this, I'm going to change modes into what is called room mode. Now, room mode, when you're looking at this, it's going to place or allow you to go in and draw a specific symbol, so to speak, and that symbol then would take with it things like baseboard and interior trim packages and finishes like paints and so on. And so you'll see up here in the other option, if I edit this room, which is already part of the design for the master, I can go in and see I'm using paint number 6, and it's going to have a colonial baseboard, and the flooring is going to be carpet and so on. And so that's part of the the room mode itself. And so as I zoom this up, I can now come in and I could select room, and I could select, let's say, kitchen. Okay, and as I do that, I'm just going to pick the auto trace and click. And here, there's already a ceiling in place, which you've seen. So I'm going to say cancel and not to add the ceiling, but it will add that room to everywhere else. And because this is a very open concept, the same paint color, the same baseboard trim, and the same flooring option are going to be carried throughout the plan. So in this case here, all of a sudden, I've got, if you will, this green, olive color, and I've got tile all the way through. Now this will be able to be modified, so I can edit this kitchen, option that's here. I can go to flooring, and for example, I could change this to be hardwood. And so when I do that, it's going to change, that material wherever this room mode was drawn, and you now see that I've got my hardwood. Now the hardwood that I'm using here, this has obviously already been set up by me, and this is actually being pulled from the list of textures that are here, and I'm in the Soft Plan Plus library. So I could pick a different texture, and have that different texture applied. If you wanted to try it with a dark hardwood, you simply click the bitmap to apply that to the option itself. So I'll click OK here. Things like wall colors, I'll be able to do a surface edit on the wall color itself. And so under the color swatch, I can then select from the manufacturer color swatches that are in there. And of course, we're open to allowing you to go in and bring your own color swatches in. These are just simply JPEGs. Okay, so I can go to the Sherwin-Williams, color selection that's here, and I can then scroll down to see what the option is that I want to use, and in this case here, turn it to more of a blue-gray, or in this case what they call rain washed. And so that's entirely up to you what you want to as far as that option is concerned. I can also modify and change things like the cabinet colors. So right now this is really it's supposed to be maple light, which is what you see there, and I happen to have modified this and just assigned a color to it. The texture is not selected. I simply picked a color. Now over here, I can modify this, okay, and just do an edit on this, and I could change this to, let's say, painted. which would then by default take it to be white in color. And so that by using the different textures or different material assignments, excuse me, you would then be able to go in and have, the island being a different color than, the rest of the cabinets, which is something you and I all know is very popular right now, just breaking the colors up. And so I could change this to a very dark gray versus the lighter gray that's in there. Okay, so that's my cabinets laid out. I've got a little bit of, wall, colors, being placed in there. And I want to go in and just simply place a backsplash across the back wall right here. And so one of the things that I can do is I'm going to edit this cabinet at this point. Okay. And as I click on this cabinet right here, and I'm going to go to the accessories option, and I'm going to select to have a tiled backsplash. Now, as I do that, I'm just going to, right click and repeat edit these changes, to this. Okay. Now I've got it looks like the tile backsplash and the paint are actually, combating with one another on this. And so I'm going to come in back to my room mode and I'm going to change into what's called interior mode. Okay, now the interior mode is going to break down my room mode into individual polygons. And if I were to right click, I can see I have paint number 5 here. Okay, is being and you also see I've got hardwood and colonial and some of the other coloring options that are there. And so I'm going to, if I come back into the 3D shaded, I just turned off or erased one of the options that was, actually on that setting there. And so now I've got my texture, my tile backsplash running across the back. And one of the things that I can do is I can actually edit this, okay, under the accessories, and I can tell it to both extend to the wall cabinet, which would be the cabinet above, and also cover the gap, which is on the right-hand side, okay, and it's going to carry that across. So in this case right here, I could edit this one and also tell it under the accessories to simply extend to the wall cabinet, okay, or change the individual height of this, manually where I want it to go. So you can see you have all kinds of options. So if I wanted this to go all the way to the top, I'm going to edit this in both cases, okay, so that we get an entire wall just by, manually overriding the default and changing that to run all the way up there. Now what I would do is simply go in and add myself a some sort of a vented hood that's going to be on there. So I'll change out of the interior mode into drawing, select my draw symbol. We've got, a series of hoods that are already in there, just depending on, what I want. And if I'm looking for something that's, a little, kind of lighter as far as, dimensions are, concerned, or not quite as bulky, I might add this one, which is going to, oops, let me add that in. And we'll just move you into place here. And I'm going to right click and just select the move. Make sure my attach is off, and we'll take a look at it inside the 3D. And so we now have that added in there. Now you might be asking, where did this texture come from? This is my own custom one that I placed in there. And so if I do a surface edit, you're going to see I've actually got a series of, these are just JPEGs that I've actually went to the manufacturer, grabbed a scan of that texture because it's a tile pattern we're going to use in this project. And so I just simply copied it into the SoftPlan 3D textures folder, which now allows me to utilize that in there. And so just by dropping that in, I now automatically have that. One of the other things you'll notice with the room mode is it's going to automatically add little things like electrical outlets on there as well for you. So speaking of electrical outlets, I'm going to come back into the main floor plan. I'm going to change into electrical. And I already have a one light fixture in here. By default, because I use the room mode, it's going to place this texture automatically in there. So I can just, add this over there, something like so. Okay, and so now what I'm going to do is just simply come in through the draw electrical symbols, and I can, do a search for pendant lights. And there's a host of them that are in there, as far as, both my manufacturers as well as, generic ones that can be used. So depending on what you want to use as far as the settings concerned, I'm not really familiar with this one, but I'm going to draw it in anyway, and I can always modify it after the fact. And so we will just simply copy these. I'll just do an equally space every 24 inches. And click OK and do another one here. Okay, and so as I take a look at these, there they are, and then I can always go in and modify things through like the surface edit, where you can change, the textures and so on, right? So I can come into this listing of colors here, and if I wanted to add, some sort of a shade color to that, just to add some color to it, I can on the actual plan itself. So as we come back into the main floor plan, and take a look at this, other things you can do for lighting would include things like adding, some can lights into this. And so I will click, and lighting is really going to be kind of your key to getting a lot of this going. Now, for today's class, I'm just going to, add a couple of these, and then I will use the move and copy block, and we'll add, something like so, just to add a few extras in there, and then we may also have some down there inside that area. Okay. I'm going to, there's a wall that needs to be here that is just missing, okay? And so at this stage now, using the draw select, this is where I could come in and select, the cabinet that I've already custom created, and basically I'm just going to add a couple of these on either side. So we're just going to do this, and I'm going to finish this by, basically creating, if you will, a coffee bar situation that will be used in here. So I'll just come in through draw, and I'm going to do this actually inside the drawing mode. So draw through and then cabinet, and select the base option. I'm not even sure how far apart these are, but I'll just pick kind of a 36 inch for right now. As far as that goes, and then I want to change the face on this, so let's just say some drawers on there, and let me see how big that is. So if I go with a 24, I may be able to get 2 of those in there. So I will turn my snap feature off, and 1, 2, and then I will just use the move block to move these 2 together real quick to create something like this and run a cleanup. And then as I do that and I jump into 3D to zoom over there, you'll see this is what we've got right now, okay? And so all I want to do at this stage is go in and add things like, maybe some shelving above there, on the actual plan itself. And so inside the main floor plan, using the draw and selecting the rod and shelf, this is where I could come in and just simply click and run this all the way across, something like so. As I edit this rod and shelf on the actual drawing here, okay, I'm going to go in and obviously turn the rod off. Okay, I can change what the offset's going to be. So let's say 4'6", and then and I'll change the depth back to more like 12 inches. And the thickness on the shelf, I'm just going for something that's a little bit thicker, and then every 12 inches we'll have one of these shelves on there. So we'll have, let's say, 3, and you can see what I've got there. And so as I come back into the 3D, I've now created that scenario, with the shelves on the actual plan. Okay, and so this is what it looks like. I've got a couple of things to do with roofs and ceilings that that are there, but that's how quickly you can actually get a kitchen layout done. So if I come back in and I turn off the Friday class for just a second, keep in mind as I do this, it's going to turn off all of everything that we've drawn, okay? And then I come in and I turn on, phase 2, which is what we have actually drawn. This would be more of the finished of what this is going to look like. So it's just going to build it at this point. Okay, and as we do, so obviously I've added some furniture here, a little bit or slightly different on the kitchen, configurations as far as that goes. But then what you can do is as you, finish this out, I will take it into the textured option. Okay, and as I take it to the textured option, it's going to give it a much cleaner finish. And then as I go from here, this is where you can come in through the options and mode options. As you increase or decrease the anti-aliasing, it's going to increase or decrease the amount of crispness to the model itself. The higher the number that you put on here, okay, the better the finished model is going to look like on your screen, but the longer it could take to generate this. On the face options, I have relief depth enabled, but if I wanted reflections on things like the upper cabinet glass, and I turn this on, it's going to take a little more time for the regeneration to take place. The default lighting, okay, by default, just, it's going to be very flat. But when you turn on the custom lighting, okay, the ambient light is the overall lighting of the model itself. Okay, you typically want to keep this fairly low because you want to come in and have your light sources actually control, what that's going to be, as far as the model is concerned. Okay, and so I'll click OK on this and just simply hit the regenerate button, and you can see my model is now going through and quickly regenerating the image. I've got some reflections now taking place in the glass cabinets, okay? The lighting itself is now being calculated. The countertop has reflections in there, so we'll just let this run through very quickly to see what we've got for the model, and you'll begin to see here, most noticeably in the floor, a finish that allows for a reflection on the actual model itself. Now, things like light sources may need to be turned down, and this can be done inside the actual electrical mode. So as you're looking at this, keeping in mind, I can now edit this, and under lights, I can turn down the brightness or I can increase the decay, okay? And as I do that, it's going to, if you will, turn down how, any of the spots that I may have just seen on the actual model itself. And so as I come back into 3D, and I'll go back into my mode options and lighting, okay, I can, set a few things up real quick and then just let this run through. And by turning down the lighting, and in this case I turned off the indirect lighting for just a moment, it takes away some of that, the spotting that you have there. We still have the reflections on as far as that goes. So this in a nutshell is designing a kitchen within SoftPlan. Obviously, in 45 minutes, there's only so much we can do, fairly quickly. But I wanted to introduce to you things like the use of building options, because I could have multiple different island configurations on here. The use of different textures, with the paint and also with the tile, and that's a custom tile that's in there. Creating or customizing your own kitchen cabinets, and even modifying and changing things like what the hardware. So you can, once again, as a review, you can see this cabinet here on the one that I've loaded up now. Again, that was just simply editing under the accessories and then having it different for the drawer, where I can then come in and modify this and again have that scallop option on that drawer right there. The room mode gives you the ability to add things like the hardwood and the ceiling all into place. And so that is, what I have for you today as far as the Friday Fundamental is concerned. I hope you found it a little bit helpful and encouraging for what you can do within SoftPlan. Once again, this video will be uploaded to our website, so you'll be able to take a look at it. And next week, we will be offering a class at the same time, if you haven't signed up for it already, which is going to take you through many of the new features in SoftPlan version 2020. This was released at the Builders Show. We're very excited about it. It's got a lot of powerful features in it. So I would encourage you, if you haven't done it already and you have the time, to sign up for that class. Other than that, that's what I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to maybe seeing you at a future class.